and welcome to Laura's Rambles. I'm your host, Laura. Today I have with me Joe, who is the creator of the webcomic Wallace the Whale. And he is here to ramble with me about Halloween traditions, memories, and why in general Halloween is one of the best holidays. Hi Joe, thanks for joining me on my podcast for Laura's Rambles.
Hey Laura, it's great to be here.
Now that we're in the month of October, it gets me thinking of spooky things, and I know you love spooky.
I do love to be spooked.
I was wondering, do you have any fun Halloween traditions that you typically do every year?
Well, when I was a kid, around Halloween, I used to go trick-or-treating. The day before Halloween, actually, growing up in Detroit, we had a tradition called Devil's Night. And basically, the abandoned houses would be burned down by gangs. There's a real problem, unfortunately, with it. So the fire departments would go around and they would actually soak the houses down during the days leading up to Devil's Night to try and counter them being burned down. In the years later, they tried to rebrand it as Angel's Night, where people would go out and actually ring bells. But I always loved October. Pumpkins and the candy, and something that I always enjoyed was being scared. I loved a good scary book. I grew up with a lot of Goosebumps books. I loved scary TV shows, and I loved scary movies.
Growing up in Chicago, we did not have Devil's Night. Mm-hmm. And the only reason I've ever heard of Devil's Night is because of The Crow. Mm-hmm. Have you seen that movie?
Actually, I don't know if I've ever seen it all the way through. I've seen parts of it, and it's one of those movies that is just become kind of part of the zeitgeist in terms of its look and feel and how it's been copied so much since.
It's fantastic. The James O'Barr graphic novel.
That's good stuff. I know there's been a number of sequels. I know there's some very strange going ons behind the scenes regarding the movie.
Yes.
There's actually a WCW wrestler called Sting who had his face paint that looked like the Crow.
Yeah, I always thought that was The Undertaker.
No, The Undertaker was in the WWF. He never painted his face. Well, he definitely put like some eyeliner on. And early on in his career, he would do up his face a little bit to look undead. Because when he first started out back in, I want to say probably the late 80s, early 90s, he was a literal dead man. Like the WWF was very much into their over-the-top gimmicks.
Really? Wrestling over-the-top gimmicks?
To the point where there were some supernatural powers going on. In fact, his ring manager was named Paul Bearer.
Very clever.
Paul Bearer was supposed to be his father, and he was this stout, very round man who was probably as wide as he was tall. Mm-hmm. And Paul Bearer was a funny guy. Unfortunately, he passed away a couple years ago. The Crow definitely kind of seeped into media and society, I would say for sure. And surprisingly, it's not a movie I think I've ever sat down and watched.
Well, it's a fantastic movie. You should. And I always thought Devil's Night was made up for that particular storyline. But then I met you.
What was the storyline?
Well, on Devil's Night.
Did the movie take place in Detroit?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
On Devil's Night,
mischief
happens and mischief goes too far. And the gangs like broke in.
Can I go ahead and stop you from spoiling it?
Well, this is just setting it up.
Oh, okay.
So the gang breaks in to his house, Brandon Lee's house. I think I'm not sure the relationship.
But there is a relationship.
Yes, I believe there
is. And the relationship we're talking about is Bruce Lee, because I don't think we actually said Bruce.
But basically a gang breaks in. They end up raping or killing or something terrible to like his wife or fiance. I don't remember if they're married at this point. I've seen this years and years ago.
Do you own this movie?
I might. I might. But basically then it turns into a love revenge story. So it's good. You should check it out. It's not scary so much because you like being scared and I am the opposite of that. I do not like being scared. However, I do very much enjoy supernatural elements of things. I love the show Supernatural.
But this movie takes place around Halloween.
It does.
So that meets the criteria.
The criteria for what?
We spoke a little bit about the topic for today, and that is our favorite Halloween traditions, favorite October traditions. And for me, I love to watch scary movies all month long. I'll watch scary movies throughout the year, but there's just something special about October. And within the last few years, I've made it a goal to watch as many movies over the 31 days in October as I can.
And you were inspired by a specific podcast? Is that right?
I've seen a number of lists on Reddit of people that will want to do 31 days of movies. There's a podcast where they will discuss movies that they want to watch over a month. And obviously October is a really special one because of how strong the influence of Halloween is over the entire month. So I would say it's probably a combination of wanting to challenge myself to watch mainly movies I haven't seen before, sprinkled in with some movies I haven't seen in a while, or movies that I like to watch just every year.
Very cool for people who enjoy scary movies. That is not me. I do like scary books though, but I think that's because I have control over the visuals.
Can I ask what your favorite scary book is?
I was hoping you wouldn't ask that.
Well, I only asked that because I wanted you to then ask me the same question, because it actually tied into what you said about being able to control the visuals. One thing that still kind of gets me is that inevitability of a character having to go and do something or having to go and be somewhere when you just want them to turn around and go the other direction, when the character has to go into that house.
So much the visual, it's the situation the character is in that sets
yes,
you
I
off.
suppose in this instance, a great one that I was thinking of was the book Pet Sematary. One of my favorite scary books, if not my favorite scary book, and a book that legitimately did scare me. And there are some scenes where you are left as the reader thinking, okay, is it possible that the author can write something different here? Because I know what they're leading up to. There's nothing I can do to stop them because these words are written on these pages coming up and I know what it's leading to. And I don't want the character to go there, but they're going to, and I'm helpless to come along.
When I think of scary books, I guess two come to mind. And one is a supernatural one because I feel like there's like slashers and zombie movies and supernatural stuff. And I guess slashers could be like true crime since horrible things like that sometimes happen. But two books that come to mind then, H.P. Lovecraft, At the Mountains of Madness.
Mm-hmm.
Like all of his, there were 4 stories, I think, in that book that I read. And they were all like very descriptive. Enough description of the gross elements, and then your imagination kind of did the rest.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a lot of that seeing like corpses or like a dog that you knew was on the expedition in Antarctica, and now they're in this like ice fortress or whatever looking for these monsters, and now you see the dog's dead and it's like, oh my god, who killed the dog? So there's a lot of like that anticipation scariness. So I think like that anticipation when I'm reading it can get kind of scary. And that also goes back to the other book that I was reading. It's not true crime, but it is a crime that can happen in real life. And we're talking about stalkers. We're talking about the book You. But just like reading a story about stalkers is disturbing enough, especially as a woman. But then you're reading it from the stalker's perspective, which is just another layer of disturbing. So I would say those are 2 books that did it for me.
I also read that. Actually, I also read both of those books. H.P. Lovecraft, let's just get away from the racist stuff. He was very racist. A number of his books, the Red Incident at Red Hook, I believe it's called.
Something like that.
What's the one that takes place by the sea with the fish people? All of these were kind of substitutes for immigrants, for people that weren't
xenophobia.
White. Yep, that's the word. You know, if you take these books on the surface level, you can enjoy them. You can also enjoy them as a period piece of what the rationale and the minds of the time were kind of thinking and how they were writing. But yeah, Lovecraft is very good. His stuff is heavily written, I guess you would say. Very descriptive, scientific, not a lot of dialogue in a traditional sense that novels are written in nowadays. Lots of long paragraphs. And the book I actually also read that as well. I know there's a TV show on Netflix, I believe.
Haven't watched it.
I haven't watched it either.
Did we look this up the other day? They're in like season 2 or 4.
I think they're 3. The one that you didn't say. And it's interesting because I'm reading a book right now called The Gift of Fear, and it deals a lot with stalkers. As a man, it's not something I think about almost ever. Not to say that a man can't have a stalker, but I came away from that book and it kind of left me with a conflicted feeling, similar to when I would watch Dexter.
Reboot.
Yeah, it's coming. I won't say you were rooting for him the way you rooted for Dexter. Oftentimes you get caught up in what he was doing. And then you realize, wait a minute, this guy's breaking the law. Wait a minute, he's breaking into her house. Spoilers for you.
That book completely disturbed me. Yeah. I read it and I was like, oh my God, he got all this information about her just because she like used a credit card at the store. I use credit cards all the time. So does everyone. Going back to the social media and learning too much about people. I always grew up being told like, if you're going on vacation, don't put it on social media because that's when burglars know to sneak into your home. And my dad will always spiral fantastical stories out of control to teach us a lesson, like scare us. So then I start now just thinking of all the terrible possible things that could happen, ridiculous scenarios. So then I think, well, okay, I'm going to go on vacation. I'm going to post photos, but I'll do it after I'm back, but make it seem like I'm on vacation then.
To lure the robbers.
And then it's like the robbers will now come into the home when I'm already in the home still. And then who knows what can happen. So don't do that either. Just keep all your stuff to yourself.
It's smart to make sure you don't share too much. And you have to ask yourself, is this information valuable to the wrong people?
And going back to the original question, I will tell you what my Halloween tradition is.
Yeah, please do.
Besides trick-or-treating in my youth, I now don't necessarily do trick-or-treating anymore because I'm too old.
When was the last time you went trick-or-treating?
Maybe freshman year of high school. So my tradition nowadays is finding cute Halloween costumes to dress my cats up in and seeing if they will allow something on their head because it's normally just a hat of some sort.
What are some of the costumes you've had in the past for your feline friends?
We've had, I guess I should paint the visual of what my cats are. So I have 2 cats named after Lord of the Rings characters. Mm-hmm. One cat is a short hair tuxedo named Shadowfax. And Eowyn is a Maine Coon mix. So she's not full-blown 30 pounds or however big Maine Coons get.
That ties into my favorite horror book, Pet Sematary, with Church. Church was, I believe, half Maine Coon, if not all Maine Coon.
Yes.
Shout out to Maine Coons.
So Eowyn is a Maine Coon, brown Maine Coon. So some of the outfits we've done, costumes in the past, since Shadowfax is a tuxedo, we've gotten her little cuff link things and a little bow tie. And then Eowyn was in a witch hat that year. Their costumes never really coincide. It's just whatever I thought was cute at Target that year. Mm-hmm. Last year, Shadowfax was a fish taco and Eowyn was a lobster. She just had a big lobster hat on.
They've celebrated Christmas, I believe.
They have. They've had elf ears and elf hats. Eowyn was a mouse. I think Shadowfax was a panda one year. I can't remember if I've done one every year. I crocheted or knit. I can't remember at this point. A little scarf, a long scarf, so that Shadowfax could be Sherlock. And then I sewed a little reddish, maroonish bow tie, so that Eowyn could be the 11th Doctor from Doctor Who.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
Do you do any other Halloween crafts? You mentioned you knit and crocheted.
When I used to live in Chicago still, I had a friend and we would do craft nights. We did do fall crafts and we made all of these yarn pumpkins, and it wasn't crochet or anything like that. It was like winding yarn around your fingers and tying it with a pipe cleaner, green pipe cleaner, and then you can make all these little pumpkins. And we were just swimming in them because they were fun and easy to make. You can make them real fast, so we just made a ton.
Yeah, I think I actually have a few as a gift.
You have some. Previous coworkers got some. I had some on my desk at work when you used to work in an office, and I had those out there, and then I had some for my personal home. So they are now pretty much all in one spot and they're taking over. So those were my fall Halloween traditions.
Okay, well, I'm currently in my movie binge. I started keeping track 2 years ago of the movies I watched. And I would give them kind of a rating out of 5. And I think 2 years ago, I read or watched about 22, 23 movies. This year, I'm going to try and watch about 75. As we are recording this, I believe it's the 6th of October.
That's correct.
I just finished Midnight Mass on Netflix. It was a 7-part limited series. They call it, the hour-long episodes from Mike Flanagan. He did Haunting on Hill House, Haunting of Bly Manor. He did the Dr. Sleep movie based off the Stephen King sequel to The Shining. And he's actually going to be doing The Fall of the House of Usher for next year. Highly recommend almost all of his work. I'm sure he's done some other things I haven't seen yet, but
is his work more psychological, thriller, monster, slasher?
I would say meant to make you think, to reflect on life. There's a lot of broken characters.
There's a lot of social commentary.
There's some social commentary, but I think it's also a little more personal. A lot of his characters are kind of broken emotionally, coming to terms with decisions you made or things that happened, making peace with your life. So yeah, I highly recommend Midnight Mass. I actually watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original from the mid-70s for the first time today. Really intense 80 minutes. And I have a list of movies that I am going to be watching, but it's kind of an organic thing. I don't always know what I'm going to watch. It's kind of what I'm feeling for the day, how the mood strikes. I think I maybe have 15 to 20 on a list that I definitely want to see. I get recommendations from friends. Like you said earlier in the podcast, I'm probably going to check out The Crow because I'm not sure I've actually ever seen it all the way through. And like, that's a movie, not necessarily a scary movie, like you said, but it takes place in that time of year. And I think scary movies and books can have a big umbrella that they fall under. Thrillers, ghost stories, slasher movies, psychological movies that take place around the Halloween time.
Witches.
Yeah.
Even though I don't like scary movies, I still like October. I like the creepiness of it. It's hard to explain because I don't like being scared. And I think for me, a lot of it is jump scares. Like, I will not do a haunted house. Have done them in the past. Hate them. Will not do them. So I think like jump scares really bother me. But like, I love Halloween decorations and like the creepiness of it and like skeletons and the witches. My dad had this big scarecrow type thing that he had built for Halloween decoration. And it was just like how you have a scarecrow, but then he made it so it was like the character from Scream. And I always thought that was cool. So I like the macabre aesthetic of Halloween and all the spookiness that comes out, but I don't necessarily like being scared.
When I was living abroad a number of years ago, I was in a country that didn't really celebrate Halloween because I don't think we really said Halloween's a very American holiday.
It seems very bizarre that they're like outside of America, they don't celebrate Halloween.
So while I was living abroad, it came to be about this time of the year. And it turned out some of the kids in the small town that we lived in knew of Halloween, but they never celebrated. So we actually set up the entrance to the office that we were working at with some spider webs and some corn husks. And we actually built this structure. We had a couple 2x4s, and then we built some arms coming off of it. And then we draped some old sheets over it, and then we put a face on it, and it looked like this ghost, and it was absolutely fantastic looking. And it just kind of loomed over the whole office. And we put some candy on the table in front of it. And the kids were terrified of it. They were legitimately scared of this, but you could tell that they were excited by it. And the parents were excited to see it. And I think they were also a little amused by how scared their kids were.
Halloween also seems to be one of the holidays that's most loved and doesn't stress people out. Like there's not that like family stress and dread.
You get a holiday like Thanksgiving, Christmas.
Even like the pressure of New Year's.
There's not a lot of stress about Halloween. I think you're absolutely right.
But you brought up decorations and I brought up decorations. Has there been like a favorite decoration, not necessarily that your family has put together, but like that sticks with you to this day from trick-or-treating? Like a neighbor had something very creepy, or there was always a house in the neighborhood that went all out?
Besides the ghost that we built, that was special because it was just so unique to the area. But I always loved the leaf bags with the pumpkin faces on them. The smell of the leaves, the sound of them crinkling in your hands, jumping into them off of the porch, stuffing the bags. And then you had these giant pumpkin heads or witches' heads. It was a great way for your parents to get you to do lawn work. And you didn't even realize it until years later. And when it came to trick-or-treating, a handful of houses over the years where, is that a man sitting on the chair or is it a scarecrow? And so you have to slowly go up. And you can ask my dad this next time he's on the podcast. He'll tell you that there was, shout out to Mr. Potter. He'll swear that there was a house that I went to and there was a figure on the porch who was very still. And then he moved and I flew off of the porch without stepping in any of the steps. So
I forgot about neighbors that did that, and that did always get me, and I was always apprehensive. Anything that was like life-size kind of freaked me out, but I also have megalophobia. So when you brought up the leaf bags that were made into jack-o'-lanterns, I remember a house that had this big spider web made out of ropes, and it went over the front door. It was one of those where it was like the garage was on the side of the house, so you could attach the rope spider web from like the garage to the lawn, and then you'd have to pass under it as a kid to get to the front door to trick or treat. So they made a giant spider to go on that spider web, and I would not go to that house because my megalophobia was there as a child.
who did you trick or treat with when you were young?
I remember always trick or treating with my mom and my brother. And then we would get old enough where it was like 8th grade or something, and you would go with a big group of friends. I distinctly remember us going as Spice Girls, and like every other group of girls were the Spice Girls, and there were just Spice Girls all over the neighborhood. So I would go with friends, but early on, I remember going with my mom and my brother.
I think I went trick-or-treating probably till about 13 or 14. Rain or shine, I would go.
Or snow.
Yeah, that definitely happened. One time, I don't remember what I went as this year, but I had a big glass of strawberry milk. Milk with strawberry quick syrup in it. And I'm not saying I'm lactose intolerant, but running around after downing a pint of milk definitely left me with terrible, terrible stomach ache. Kind of ruined that Halloween, to be honest. I don't remember what ended up happening.
You had to block it from your mind.
Yeah, I'm sure I powered through. And also, did you do the pillowcase for the candy?
No, we had like dedicated Halloween like pumpkin head buckets.
Oh, okay. Yeah, those were not sufficient for the amount of candy that I was taking in. I remember always having the pillowcase. And I remember some of my costumes. I know I went as a killer clown one year, went as Darth Vader one year. I think one of my favorite costumes was a Phantom of the Opera costume because I had this great cape. I had like a big hat, and then I had this mask. It just kind of went like the Phantom of the Opera, where it went over both eyes and then one of the cheeks. And then it had Velcro on it. And that first mask was just kind of disfigured Phantom of the Opera skin. And then this Velcro white mask went on top of it. And that one was a really cool outfit because when it comes to wearing masks and running around, you get real sweaty real fast. And
Never wore a mask.
It's a terrible idea. I remember the clown mask I wore was just awful. And so I ended up not wearing it. And then people just thought I was a regular clown. There's nothing worse than people thinking you're just a regular clown, because as a boy, you want to be scary. And I don't know why people thought that, because I wasn't wearing any face paint. And I remember another year when I went as Darth Vader, that was a really nice mask too, because that had his kind of the black face mask that he wears. And then a separate piece was the dome that went on top of it. I'm pantomiming how this looks, so it's a really terrible idea for a podcast. But that one also just got too hot and I couldn't see out of it. And so people thought I was a robot when I wasn't wearing the mask because I had the Darth Vader jumper thing on.
I just remember really going as Posh Spice. And then I remember I was an Easter Bunny a couple of years. And I think I was a duck at one point. And I was an ice demon. And I thought that was cool because I made it up myself. And I just had a lot of like blue and silver and white like makeup on. And then I sewed real terribly blue felt flames onto a white shirt. And that was my costume. I thought it was pretty cool. Oh, and one year I went as Debbie Thornberry, who is like the teenager who like is too cool for school.
And what's she from?
The Wild Thornberries.
Okay, I'm not at all familiar with that.
It was on Nickelodeon.
So, having talked about the past Halloweens, for this upcoming one, what are you most excited for?
Cat costumes, because I do it almost every year now.
Yep.
Also, picking a Halloween costume, because your sister throws on a big Halloween party.
We'll see with COVID.
But we never were able to attend, and we never went to any Halloween parties. So we never actually had any couples costumes.
Yeah, so we have a backlog of costumes that we need to do for this year.
Especially with Joe's COVID hair, which you can't see, but it is very long. So I have to take advantage of that while he has it.
I'm excited also for dressing up for Halloween. It's funny because Halloween is one of those things where when you're young, it's really cool. And then you get to be an age where it's not cool. But then it gets cool again.
But in a slutty way.
Some might say that's even better. But there's a number of years when you're a teenager where it's not cool. And then you get to probably college and it's cool again. I always get excited to carve a pumpkin. Obviously, I'm excited to continue watching the scary movies, which was what we were talking about when we started our favorite traditions. So we have about a little over, probably about 3.5 weeks until Halloween to try and cram all that stuff in. We did just buy a couple Halloween decorations for the outside of the house that we're excited for. We bought some pumpkins. We actually live not too far from a farm. We're going to get a number of those. We got some hay bales. We bought a light projection of it's like a witch skeleton that kind of shimmers.
It's like a Grim Reaper.
Grim Reaper, okay. Yeah, you kind of project it onto a side of your house. Mm-hmm. So we're going to set that up, and we're going to try and terrorize some children, I think, that are going to be trick-or-treating.
Not all of us are going to terrorize.
I would say 50% of us will.
But the decoration, the projector Grim Reaper that kind of like waves, it's funny because we just watched that Halloween episode of Bob's Burgers where Teddy's rival handyman is putting on a Halloween display outside of Bob's Burgers' neighbors, and they have this like Grim Reaper that's projected onto like mist, and it reminded me of that. Bob's Burgers is a good show, so
I would say it's a great show. Also, Netflix, it's a little sidebar here. Give us the power to make playlists so that we can add our favorite shows, such as all the Halloween episodes.
Or just holiday episodes in general.
Or holiday episodes.
Because
or any
New
kind
Girl
of themes.
has amazing Thanksgiving episodes.
Yeah, exactly. So that's something else I really look forward to. And that kind of goes for year round, is when the shows all do their Halloween episodes or all do their Christmas episodes. Halloween also kind of starts to mark the end of the year.
We're starting to get into holiday season where all the holidays are like right in a row, the big ones. But Halloween is a good one to start it off with.
Probably is my favorite holiday.
Thanksgiving's my favorite holiday, but Halloween is my second favorite holiday.
And this is your time of year.
Thank you, Joe, for joining me on this episode of Laura's Rambles podcast.
Yeah, this has been great. You have me back.
I definitely will. Is there anything you want to plug?
Check out wallacethewhale.com, wallacewhale.com. I think it's Wallace at the Wallace the Whale on Instagram. He's a whale that just gets into misadventures in everyday life. And I try and post it every week or every other week.
And while you're there, check out Laura's Rambles.
Yeah, definitely do that. If you're going to do anything, check out Laura's Rambles. Since you're on this podcast, you've probably already checked it out. But go ahead and check it out 2 or 3 more times.
Check it out harder.
Really get into the checkout.
And on that note, thank you so much for joining us.